Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Max, and thanks for attending my session on transforming images anywhere with Photoshop by Terry White, myself, worldwide photography evangelist here at Adobe. So let's get started. I'm going to switch over to Photoshop, where all good things start, and I'm going to just take you through a lot of the new things that have been added to Photoshop since last Adobe Max. Let's start with making selections. For those of you who are new to making selections or maybe used Photoshop over the years, I'm going to just give you a quick nostalgia look back where we started with the magic wand tool. Remember that? Where it was based on color selections, and you could hold down your shift key and you could keep clicking, or you can increase the tolerance, and eventually you would get what you want. Well, we've come a long ways since the magic wand tool. Last year, we introduced the object selection tool. And the object selection tool is literally where you just drag a selection around the object you want. And it's like having select subject on a tool and it figures it out. Now, you may have noticed that as I've been hovering with that tool over some of the pieces of this, they've been turning blue. Let me deselect by hitting Command D. By the way, I'm running this on a MacBook Pro M1, so Apple's silicon-based Mac. So M1, just that's another kind of behind-the-scenes new feature, is that we run native on Apple Silicon. But anyway, back to the object selection tool. It has a new auto masking mode that's a part of it. So as I hover over things that it identifies, I don't even have to drag around them. It just knows what they are. So if I click there, it selects it. If I hold down my shift key, click this one, selects it, that one, selects it. I'm just continuing to hold down my shift key as I make these selections. Now, what's great about this is you don't have to train it, you don't have to think about it. The minute you open your image and you click on Object Select Tool, it might spin for a second while it's figuring out all the stuff that's in the image, and then it'll let you just hover over everything that it sees, allowing you to just simply click to make those selections. And like I said, I made multiple selections by holding down the Shift key. Now that I've done that, why would we make these selections in the first place? Well, if I go in and choose a non-destructive adjustment layer, such as hue and saturation, one of my favorites, you can easily go in now and change the color of those objects because they're the only things that are selected. They're the only things that are getting changed. So that's pretty cool. Now, that's not the only thing. That's not the only part of this new feature. If I right-click on the original layer, the one that has the dessert, right-click, I'll get an option that says mask all objects. That's also brand new in this new version of Photoshop as of Adobe Max. So when I say mask all objects, you'll probably get a progress bar while it figures out what all the objects are. And then just like that, it's created a separate mask for every object that it identified. So at any point, just hold down your Command key on Mac, PC Control key, and click, and you're making those selections that are already masked. So it doesn't know what they are. It doesn't name them. It just, background number 2, background number 3, because it doesn't know what they are. But you can see by the little cutout in the mask, you can probably identify which one, and then you can go in and rename them if you want. So if you want to rename these masks so that you always have access to them, you can quickly and easily do that. So that's the new object selection tool, which was introduced last year. And now it has auto masking built into it so that you don't even have to click and drag. You don't have to use a lasso or rectangle. It will figure out what the object is just by hovering over it. All right, so let's move on. The next one is kind of a cool one for anyone that works with our other products like Illustrator. So the interoperability between Illustrator and Photoshop just got a whole lot better. And I get this question from time to time. People ask me on social, well, Terry, how do you open an Illustrator file in Photoshop? And I give them a couple of techniques like saving it out as a PSD with layers and all that from Illustrator. But it just got a little easier for people depending on your Illustrator document. So let me pop over to Adobe Illustrator, where I've got this drawing by Victoria Pavlov. She drew this flower in a vase for me, all in Illustrator from scratch. And she created all these layers. Some of them she named, some of them she didn't. That's okay. I went and named a couple more. I named the stem layer just so I'd know what it is, the shadow layer just so I would know what it is. But anyway, there's, I don't know, a good 20 or 30 or so layers here. So all of these layers are here, and I lock the background layers. So this layer is part of the background. This layer is part of the background. I don't even know if there's anything on that layer, but I lock those bottom two layers so that they don't get selected. In other words, I don't want those layers. I only want the base and the shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab my selection tool, drag around the whole thing, so I get only all the layers selected, all the pieces selected that I want. And now I'm just going to do a copy. You could also just do Command C or PC Control C. I'm just going to do a copy. I'm going to head over to Photoshop. Now, I already have a blank canvas created. But if you didn't, you could now just go File, New. And Photoshop has always had this ability that, or has had it for years and years, if you hit new and it sees something on the clipboard, it'll automatically propose that canvas size so that when you paste it or when you code paste it, you're pasting it onto a canvas that would be big enough. Well, I've already made that canvas and I made it a little bigger just so I'd have a little more room. But anyway, I'll just now go paste, Command D, and now I get this dialog box, which we used to get before, but this dialog box before would only give us these bottom four options: Smart Object, Pixels, Path, or Shape Layer. Meaning, take the whole thing and make it a smart object. Take the whole thing and just make it a pixel layer. Take the whole thing and make it one path layer. Take the whole thing and make it one shape layer. Now I get a new option at the very top that says layers with an S, plural. So when I click OK, it brings them all in, and it brings them all in as layer groups with everything there. Now, the original background layer, that was the background that I created when I created the new document. But the shadow layer's there, the stem layer's there. If I go up, there's a vase layer that I named. That layer's there, or at least part of the vase. And here's the beauty of it. It's not just naming the layers, it's actually maintaining them as vector shapes. So if I go to my direct selection tool and I click on this vector shape, there we go. All right, double click, sorry. Double click, and then I can get to the actual vectors, handles of those layers, not pixels. And then I can go ahead and reshape it. Double click, and you can get to your shapes and be able to reshape them or recolor them or redo anything you want as if you'd drawn this directly inside of Photoshop. So that's a cool interoperability feature for people that use Illustrator. Next up, let's go ahead and switch over to another image. And last year we made a big deal about neural filters, where we're taking the neural filters up a notch this year. So let's go for this, this kind of forest scene here. I'm going to go to my filter menu, come down to neural filters. And when I come down to neural filters, first of all, you'll see some new ones. You'll see some new organizations. So featured, beta is the one that are always being improved and worked on. Featured means that they think it's ready to go, but you can always get feedback. And there's a new one called Landscape Mixer, and this one's pretty hot. So when I click on Landscape Mixer, first and foremost, I get the ability to use presets. So if I kind of say, hey, I want to change the look of my image to be more like this sunset, I click on it, you'll see that it's either going to say processing on device or processing in the cloud, depending on the filter. All right, so that kind of gave me the look that it showed me. So yeah, I'm getting that colorization, I'm getting that look, made my forest a little darker, kind of more sunset-like, and I can always reset it. But you'll also notice something down here at the bottom is that there are sliders for the different seasons. So if I had a summer photo, but I needed a winter photo, I can just drag the winter slider all the way over and say, hey, neural filter, go for it. Give me snow, give me a winter look, give me winter colors. And it's just amazing that it does this well. And so, for example, you also have, there's a preset up here that looks like winter. If I click on that one, we'll get that one. It's a slightly different variation of it. And if you don't want to use any of these presets, or these presets aren't quite what you need, and you have your own image, you can always go to custom, and then you can say select image and use an image that's already open. So like if you had an image that's already open, you want to use that image, you could just go ahead and choose it right then and there. So whether it's the presets, these season sliders, or your own custom image, you can really remix your landscapes now in a cool new way. And just for the sake of having fun, let's go back and reset it one more time. And since we are in fall time, let's go ahead and just give this some autumn look I'll go ahead and crank the autumn all the way up, and there we go. We get fall time with our trees. They're not as green. They're starting to turn, yellow and orange as things typically happen in the fall. Now, with any of this, you can output it as a new layer when you click OK. So if I output it as a new layer, I get that new layer on top of my existing layer, keeping it non-destructive. All right, let's go next to the next image. Another neural filter. We had this one last year, but we've improved it. So if I go to neural filters and I take this black and white scene and I wished it were in color, colorize has now made its way out of beta into featured. And I can click colorize and it just does a really good job figuring out what the sky is, what the ground is, what the water is, and everything that it needs to do to make this look good. Now, let's say it didn't look good because it's AI. That means it's not going to be perfect on every single image. You always have the ability to come down here at the very bottom, even on the ones that are released, and say, I'm satisfied with the image or I'm not satisfied with the results of the image. So if I say yes, I can give them feedback on what I liked about it, what it did. If I say no, then I can also give them feedback on what it didn't do, what I thought didn't work, so forth and so on. And you also have the option to include the image with feedback so they can actually see the results. They can see what it did wrong. So they encourage you, good or bad, to always tell them what it did good or bad. All right, next up, let's cancel all of that. They can also output that as a new layer. I'm gonna go here to colorize, and the same thing here, colorizing with neural filters, but it's gotten a lot better with people. Last year, people, it just didn't do as good of a job as it does now. And it's even picking out skin tones, doing a much better job with the hands and feet. That was one of the areas that kind of skipped. Now, again, here it kind of missed the ponytail and maybe the sweater color a little bit, but I would output that as a new layer and just paint it back in on the areas that it need to be painted in on. So that is the colorized neural filter. All right, next up, this is brand new, the depth, actually improved, the depth blur filter. So you have an image like this, and as my buddy Scott Kelby would say, I don't know what to look at. Well, what's the subject? Is it just a messy kid room, or is there something I'm supposed to look at? So I'm just like scanning around the room, don't know what to look at. So a lot of times a photographer will add emphasis to a photo by putting the rest of the photo out, or emphasis to a subject by putting the rest of the photo out of focus. So if I go to depth blur, which is brand new, I get the ability to add a depth blur to the image to automatically figure out what should be in focus and make everything else out of focus. And if it's not quite right, you have focal distance and blur strength. So if you thought that was too blurry, you can pull it back a little and it'll recalculate based on that and make it less blurry. But again, keeping the emphasis on one of my favorite toys. Looks like a toy truck there. I'm not going to name a brand, but it looks like a cool truck. All right, but anyway, focal distance, play with that to kind of change what it focuses in on. And then you also have blur strength to choose as well. So that is the new depth blur filter. All right, and it's also based on the lens blur technology. Next up, let's take a look at some new masking capabilities in Camera Raw. And since we have a Camera Raw filter, it's relevant to talk about it here in Photoshop. Normally I would talk about this in Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, but Photoshop users can use it too. So if I go to my filter menu, the first thing I would do is convert for smart filters. I'm not going to do that on every single one because I've already shown you how to do it. That takes the layer and makes it into a smart object. So that basically when you apply the filter, it's non-destructive. Now I'm going to go to the Camera Raw filter. And what I want to do is I want to change the color of her blouse. And you could do that a million ways in Photoshop. But now it's much easier with the masking in Camera Raw, and plus it's non-destructive. So if I click the new masking, I now have all my masking tools in one area, including one called Color Range, which used to be tied to local adjustments. So I can just say, hey, that's the color I want to change. And then I get all my options for changing it down here in Camera Raw. So I can say, just use the local hue adjustment, and I can say, oh, look, I want to change that to more of a green color. But wait, there's a problem. It created a mask based on that color, and her lipstick was the original red as well. Well, you'll notice on the masking, I have the ability to hit subtract. So I can subtract using any one of the other methods or any method I want, including brush. So the original adjustment brush can be used to add or subtract from areas that the AI-based filter didn't quite get it, or the manual filter didn't quite get it. And you can have multiple masks, so therefore you can name them whatever you want. I'll name that one blouse. All right, next up, let's go ahead and click OK on that. And again, because we did it as a smart filters or basically a smart object, we can always turn it on, turn it off, or double click and get right back to the camera raw settings. All right, next up, let's go ahead and go here to the bridge. And this bridge needs a little work. It's kind of leaning over, and I would fix that in Camera Raw. So, but before we get to the Camera Raw part of it, I want to just show you that we introduced sky replacement last year, and sky replacement is getting a bump this year, which gives us the ability. We always have the ability to add your own skies, but now when you add your own skies, you don't have to do them one at a time anymore. You can make a new folder, call it whatever you want, click the plus sign to import your own JPEG skies, and you can import up to 5,000 at one time instead of one at a time. But wait, there's more. What if you're not a photographer and you don't have pictures of your own skies? Go to the flyout menu, get more skies, download free skies. And what that will do is take you to your web browser. It will take you to the, here, I think I already have the page up, to the sky area here, and you can download any of these free skies, night skies, spectacular skies, blue skies, storms, so forth and so on. And these are the photographers that took them. And you can import those skies into Photoshop and use them all day long. Now, when you import them, instead of importing them like I was showing you how to import your own down here, what you want to do is go over here to the flyout menu. You want to say get more skies. Now that you've downloaded them, you want to say import presets, because they download as presets, not individual images. So all the sunsets are in one preset file, probably in your downloads folder. That's where you go find it to import it. And then they're there. They're in your Photoshop from that point on to use whenever you want. All right, so now that I got that sky selected, or the sky imported, it's a layer group. I can always turn it on, turn it off. Let me turn it off for a second. And let's go into Camera Raw filter on this image. And Camera Raw filter. Next up, I just want to go ahead and choose to do a little bit of geometry. Let's do a auto upright on this. Kind of bring that bridge up a little bit. Auto's not quite getting it, so let me do a guided one where I'm going to tell it this should be straight and this should be straight. There we go. And this across should be straight. There we go. Now I can also go in and crop it, or I could scale it up. I'm going to end up just cropping it, but you get the idea. Now we got this straightened out. Let's go ahead and crop it a little bit so that we don't get that excess white space on the sides that we don't need. All right, and there we go. We'll keep the crop non-destructive. Now, when I turn on that sky, our image looks a lot better. Oh, but look, the sky is not corrected as well. So you probably want to do the correction first, because the sky creates a mask that is now off. So I could basically toss this, run the sky replacement again, and it would be perfect in this case, because now the image has been transformed. So giving you a little bit of a workflow tip there by mistake as well. And now you've got it. All right, so now that we got that in place, just making the sky really super dramatic. You can pick whatever sky you want. Just know that you've got the ability to do this as a sky replacement, or if you just wanted to adjust your existing sky, you've also got it as a Camera Raw filter. So if I go to Camera Raw filter and I go into the masking, it now has select sky as well. So if I click select sky, I can choose the sky and do whatever I want, such as dehaze, adding some dehaze to the sky, adding some color temperature, making it a little bluer. There we go. As well as maybe dropping the exposure down a bit as well. All right, so either way you do it, you've got choices on how you can work with skies now in Photoshop. All right, that's Photoshop on desktop. I'm going to switch gears for a second here and finish up in Photoshop on iPad, on my mobile device here. So I got Photoshop running on my iPad. Let me just go ahead and hide everything else. There we go. All right, Photoshop running on my iPad, and a couple new things here. I'm going to go ahead and import open from photos. You'll notice that I got some photos in here, one of which is a raw image. So Camera Raw is now built into Photoshop on iPad, just like it is in Photoshop on desktop. So I can go ahead and just do all these non-destructive adjustments. And when I import it, if I'm finished making the adjustments, I can tell it to do it as a smart object or as just a pixel layer, which would then be destructive. So so by the way, that's the second feature that I'm going to talk about, is that it now supports, has limited support for smart objects. Now I'm going to zoom in on this area of the face here where I would normally do some portrait retouching. I'm going to duplicate the layer. Let's do that. And when I duplicate the layer, I'm going to set the blend mode to that layer to luminosity. And it's just a dodge and burn technique that I use. And that brings up my next point, is that now Photoshop on the iPad has the dodge and burn tool. So I can go to my burn tool, for example, and just start burning in some of the dark areas around her face, just the edges here around her face to add more depth and sculpture. I can switch over to the dodge tool and I can lighten up areas of the photo, like around her eyes and eye sockets, things that normally might be dark based on the lighting of the photo. And you can go to town here with this, because even though it might look like you haven't done anything, or it might look a little overdone, keep in mind that's on its own layer. So I can always turn it off, see the before and after, and I also have the ability to, best of all, lower the opacity of it. So it's not as strong of an adjustment as it was before. So you can dial it down a bit. I normally start around 50% and go down from there. All right, so that is Camera Raw support, Smart Object support, Dodge and Burn tool. What else? Let's go ahead and import one more here. And I'm going to import another photo from my Camera Raw selection here. And I can just go ahead and drop the exposure down or up. And also add a little dehaze to this. There we go. And just import this in just as a regular layer for now. All right, so now I got my regular layer. When I place a new image, I also have the ability to place an image that is also raw. So I'll place this image here, which is a raw file. I'm not going to do anything to it, just import it in as a regular layer. And now we'll go ahead and drop that layer down a bit. We'll size it up because it's already in free transform. Size it up a bit more. Oh. And last but not least, we'll say done, and we'll use the selection tool, which we have an automatic remove background based on select subject. So figures out the subject, removes the background, and then it created a mask. So it didn't delete the pixels because the mask may not, or the selection may not be perfect. So I can go in with my paintbrush. Let's grab my paintbrush. I'm on black paint, and I can see a little bit of edge here. It missed on her arm. No problem. Under the arm, no problem. And now we've got our subject in place with a layered file just like that. And just another couple quick tips. You have the ability to swap your colors just by swiping up and down your foreground and background color. And you also have the invite to edit or comment and review option in the upper right-hand corner for people that are doing a review workflow and they want the ability to share this file for comment and review. So the person gets a document for whatever reason won't let me do it. But anyway, you'll get the option to get a link, a public link for this file, and then that person that you send that link to will be able to open it up in their web browser and make comments on it. And now those comments will come back down to Photoshop. Yeah, my commenting system may be offline right now, but you'll get the comment panel right here in Photoshop on the iPad as well. So for those of you who are interested in Photoshop, hopefully I've given you enough to go home and play with, or you're already at home going to play with. And this has been Transforming Images Anywhere in Photoshop. So with that, cheers everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye everybody.